The river swallowed her scream. Amara had barely touched the water's edge when something beneath the surface grabbed her ankle and yanked hard. She gasped, stumbling forward onto her knees in the mud, her wrapper soaking through in seconds. The cold shot up her spine like a blade. The other women at the riverbank screamed and scrambled back, dropping their clay pots, their laundry, their laughter. All of it gone in an instant. Then, just as suddenly, the grip released. Amara sat there in the shallow water, trembling, staring at the river like it had spoken her name. Because somehow she knew it had. Not with words, but with intention, with a pull that felt less like drowning and more like summons. She pressed her hand to her chest and felt her heart slamming against her ribs. Amara, her friend Zola, was at her side instantly, hauling her up by the arm, mud streaking both of them. What happened? Did you slip? Did something bite you? Amara shook her head slowly. She couldn't explain it. She didn't have the words yet, but something had shifted in the world. She could feel it the same way you feel a storm before the clouds arrive. She stood up, wrung out the edge of her wrapper, and looked at the river one last time. "I'm fine," she said, but she was not fine. Amara had been married to Kofi for 7 years. 7 harvests. 7 rainy seasons. 7 years of waking up next to a man who loved her patiently and completely, who never once raised his voice at her empty womb, who sat with her on the worst nights and said nothing because there was nothing to say. 7 years of watching her belly remain flat while the village swelled with children around her. She had tried everything. She had visited the herbalist 3 times. She had drunk bitter teas that made her retch for days. She had rubbed strange oils on her stomach by moonlight. She had fasted. She had prayed to her ancestors. She had done everything the old women had whispered to her at the market, and none of it had worked. And now here she was. If you've been enjoying this story so far, do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment below. It truly helps us bring more stories like this to life. The village of Asoro sat on the edge of the Omi River, and everyone who lived there knew 2 things about the river. First, it gave life. It fed their crops, watered their animals, and filled their bellies through dry seasons that would have destroyed lesser villages. Second, it was watched over by Olu, the water goddess, ancient and powerful and not to be trifled with. Most people respected that boundary. They made their offerings at the riverbank during festivals. They taught their children not to swim in certain parts. They kept their distance from the deep water after sunset. Amara had always respected those rules, until desperation made her reckless. It started with a dream. She saw a woman standing in the middle of the river, the water reaching her waist, her skin the color of deep river clay, her eyes white as fish bones. The woman had stretched out her hand, and in her palm was a baby, small, glowing faintly, breathing slowly, and impossibly beautiful. Amara had reached for the baby, but the woman had pulled it back and shaken her head. Amara had woken up drenched in sweat, her husband sleeping soundly beside her, and she had lain in the dark for hours with that image burned into the back of her eyes. She told Zola about it the next morning at the river. Zola was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Amara, don't." "Don't what?" "I haven't said anything. You have that look. That look you get when you've already decided something, and you're just waiting for someone to argue with you about it." Amara sucked her teeth. "You don't know what I'm thinking." "I know exactly what you're thinking. You want to go to the deep bend at night and call on Olu." Zola turned to face her fully, and her voice dropped low. "Amara, people who go to Olu uninvited don't always come back the same." "I'm already not the same." Amara's voice cracked on the last word.
She hadn't meant for it to.
She pressed her lips together and looked away, blinking fast. "Every morning I wake up, and the first thing I feel is this emptiness. Like something was supposed to be inside me, and it isn't. Every time I see Beezy carrying her son on her back. Every time Mama asks me quietly if there's any news. Every time Kofi looks at me and tries to hide that he's hoping." She exhaled. "I can't keep living like this, Zola." Zola said nothing. She just reached out and took Amara's hand. That night, Amara went to the river alone. She had waited until Kofi's breathing deepened into sleep. She had then slipped out of the hut quietly, wrapped herself in a dark cloth, and walked the path to the deep bend, the part of the river the children were forbidden from, the part where the water turned black even in daylight, where the current moved strangely, circling inward like it was thinking. She stood at the edge, and her courage nearly failed her. The night was loud with insects. The moon was half hidden behind slow clouds. The water was completely still in a way that felt wrong for a moving river, and the air smelled of something sweet and old, like flowers left too long on an altar. "Olu," she whispered. But there was nothing. She swallowed hard and tried again, louder this time. "Olu, I have come to ask for your help. I am Amara, wife of Kofi, daughter of this river village. I have carried this emptiness for 7 years, and I cannot carry it any longer." Her voice was shaking, but she pressed forward. "Please, I am begging you, give me a child." The river shifted. It wasn't wind. There was no wind. But the surface of the water rippled outward from the center, slowly, evenly, like something enormous had exhaled beneath it. Then the ripple stopped. Then the water glowed, faint at first, then brighter, a soft blue-white light rising from the deep, illuminating the surface from below. Amara's feet were frozen to the bank. She wanted to run, but she did not. The woman from her dream rose from the water. She was taller than Amara expected. Her presence filled the space around her the way heat fills a room. Her eyes were exactly as Amara had dreamed them, white, unreadable, ancient. Her hair floated around her head, as if she were still submerged. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the water, from the trees, from inside Amara's own chest. "You called, Olu," the water goddess said. Amara's knees shook. She forced herself to stay upright. "Yes, I called. I know what you need." Olu's gaze moved over her slowly. "The question is whether you are ready for what comes with it." "I am ready," Amara said immediately. "I have been ready for 7 years. I am ready for anything." Olu's expression flickered. "You are impatient," the water goddess said. "That is not the same as ready." Amara opened her mouth to argue, then stopped herself. She needed this woman. She could not afford pride right now. "Tell me what I must do," she said quietly. The water goddess was silent for a long moment. The light beneath the water pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat. Then she spoke. "I will give you a daughter. She will be healthy. She will be beautiful. She will bring you more joy than you have ever known." Then she paused. "But she is of 2 worlds, Amara. Part of her will always belong to this river. You must never, not once, not ever, allow her to touch the water of the Omi. She must not drink from it. She must not play in it, not to wade in it. If she ever touches this river, she will hear it calling her home, and I will not be able to stop what follows." The warning was clear and direct. It was impossible to misunderstand. "Do you accept?" Olu, the water goddess, asked. "Yes," Amara said, without hesitation, without thinking about it. And before Olu could say anything else, Amara fled back home. Such impatience." Olu sighed, shaking her head, and went back into the water. Days turned into weeks, and Kofi noticed the change in Amara before she told him anything. He noticed it in the way she hummed while cooking, low and absent, like someone replaying a conversation in their head. He noticed it in the way she touched her stomach sometimes, not clutching or hoping the way she used to, but gently, the way you touch something you already know is there. He noticed it 3 mornings in a row when she pressed her hand to her mouth and rushed outside before the sun had fully risen. On the 4th morning, he followed her. She was crouched behind the hut, one hand on the wall for balance, breathing carefully through her nose. When she heard his footsteps, she looked up, and the expression on her face stopped him completely. It was something he had never seen on his wife's face before. "Kofi," she said gently. He crouched down beside her in the dirt. "Tell me." She told him everything. The dream, the river, Olu, the warning. She watched his face as she spoke, watched it move through confusion and disbelief and brief anger before settling into a long, careful stillness. When she finished, he was quiet for so long she started to feel sick. Then he said, "She warned you." "Yes." "And you agreed?" "Yes." "Amara." He exhaled through his nose. "You made a covenant with the river goddess at midnight without waking me." "I know," she said, guiltily. "Without asking me." "I know, Kofi." "Without even—" He stopped and pressed his hands together. He looked at the ground for a moment, but when he looked back up, his eyes were wet. "Are you certain? Are you truly certain?" She took his hand and placed it flat against her stomach. "I am certain." He closed his eyes, and despite the fear and the secrecy and the weight of what she had agreed to, she saw his lips pressed together in the way they did when he was trying not to smile. She felt the warmth of it move through her like sunlight through water. "No river," he said finally. "Not even her feet." "Not even her feet," Amara agreed. They held each other in the dirt behind the hut as the village woke up around them, and for the first time in 7 years, the emptiness inside Amara was gone. The pregnancy was extraordinary. Amara glowed in the way that people talk about, but rarely mean literally.
Her skin seemed lit from within.
She slept deeply and woke refreshed. She ate well and craved strange, beautiful things. Mangoes at midnight, the smell of rain on dry earth, the sound of drumming from across the village. Other women who had been pregnant before said they had never seen anything like it. Zola pulled her aside one afternoon and whispered, "People are talking." "Let them talk," Amara said cheerfully.
Amara.
"They are saying the child is unusual, that even before she is born she is unusual." "All children are unusual." Zola grabbed her arm. "I'm serious. Mama Tund says she can feel something around you. Something odd." She lowered her voice further. "She says it smells like the river." Amara pulled her arm back gently. "Mama Tund smells the river everywhere. She lives 30 steps from it." But that night, alone, Amara listened to her own stomach, and she heard it. Faint, rhythmic, unmistakable, the sound of moving water. Not her own blood, not her own heartbeat. Something else. Something that lived in the child the way a river lives in its own banks. She said nothing to Kofi. She told herself it meant nothing. Adara was born on a night of heavy rain. She arrived quickly and quietly, which the midwife said was unusual for a first child. She did not scream when she came into the world. She opened her eyes immediately, wide, clear eyes, darker than a night river, and looked around the room with an expression of calm attention that made the midwife take a step backward. "This child has been here before," the old woman murmured. Amara did not hear her. She was already holding Adara against her chest, already weeping, already so completely undone by love that nothing else in the world existed. Kofi stood at the edge of the room and watched his wife and daughter, and his face held an expression he would carry for the rest of his life. Pure, unguarded joy, with something small and shadowed moving underneath it. That shadow was the warning. He never forgot the warning. Adara grew so quickly. By the age of 2, she was speaking in full sentences. And at 3, she could name every bird that passed over the village. By 4, she was asking questions that made the elders exchange glances. Deep questions, patient questions, questions about where water went when it rained and where the sun slept and what was at the bottom of the river. That last question made Kofi's stomach tighten every time. "She's curious," Amara always said. "All children are curious." "She asks about the river every day," Kofi said one evening, his voice low so Adara, sleeping in the next room, couldn't hear. "Every single day, Amara. Because she can see it from the village. It's because the other children play near it, and we have told her she cannot go close, and you know children always want what they cannot have." Amara set down the cloth she was folding. "You worry too much." "You worry too little," he said firmly. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked away. The truth she would not say out loud was this. She had begun to relax. Not all at once, but slowly, the way you stop checking a wound, once it seems healed. In the beginning she had been vigilant. She had kept Adara far from the river. She had redirected every question, distracted every drift toward the water. But Adara was 5 now and healthy and radiant, and the years had a way of softening urgency into habit, and habit into something you did without thinking, and then eventually something you almost forgot. She told herself she had not forgotten, and that she had simply stopped being afraid. And that was the moment things began to shift. It was a small thing at first. Adara started sleepwalking. Amara would wake in the night to find the child standing in the middle of the room, eyes open but unseeing, facing the direction of the river. She would guide her gently back to her mat, and Adara would lie down without waking, and in the morning she remembered nothing. The third time it happened, Amara stood at the doorway of the hut for a long time after settling Adara back to sleep, staring toward the dark tree line that hid the river from view. She told herself it was nothing, but she bolted the door that night, and the night after, and every night after that. Then the dry season came, and with it the festival, and the whole village moved toward the river. The annual festival of Omi was the largest celebration in Asoro. It lasted 3 days. It involved drumming and dancing and food and offerings, and every single person in the village gathered at the riverbank to give thanks to Olu for the water that kept them alive. It had happened every year for generations. There was no version of life in Asoro that didn't include this festival. And the festival always happened at the river. Kofi found Amara the morning it began, watching Adara eat breakfast with bright eyes and excited energy, already asking when they would go, already bouncing on her mat. "We could stay home," he said quietly, standing close to Amara so only she could hear. "We could tell her she's unwell." "And next year?" Amara said. "And the year after?" "Kofi, we cannot keep her from the river forever. We will keep her close. We will hold her hand. She will not touch the water. She never has after all." He looked at her for a long time. "Amara."
"She will be fine," she said.
"I will not let her out of my sight." The festival was everything Adara had imagined and more. Her eyes went wide the moment they arrived at the riverbank. The drumming hit her in the chest like a second heartbeat. The colors, orange and blue and deep river green, moved through the crowd like living things. The smell of smoked fish and palm oil and fresh flowers laid at the water's edge wrapped around her and pulled her forward, and she gripped her mother's hand tightly, not out of fear, but out of the overwhelming sensation that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Mama," she breathed. "Mama, look." "I see it," Amara said, squeezing her hand. "Stay close." Adara stayed close. For hours she stayed close, pressed against her mother's side as the elders made offerings, watching the dancers with open-mouthed delight, eating groundnuts from a folded leaf, laughing when Zola's youngest son tripped over a drum and sat down hard in the dirt. She was 5 years old and luminous and perfectly happy. Kofi watched her the whole time. He watched the way she looked at the water. Not the way the other children looked at it, with the restless curiosity of children who want to splash and play. Adara looked at the river the way you look at someone you recognize from a dream. Still. Focused. Like she was listening to something no one else could hear. He moved closer to Amara. "I want to leave soon. The ceremony isn't finished." "I know. I still want to leave soon. I don't feel too good." Amara looked at him, then looked at Adara, who was now watching a group of older girls scatter flower petals on the water surface. Her expression was unreadable. Her lips were slightly parted. The river light was catching in her dark eyes and making them shimmer in a way that had nothing to do with the festival torches. "Adara," Amara said. "Come, let's move back a little." Adara didn't respond. "Adara." The drum shifted, a deeper rhythm now, the one reserved for the climax of the ceremony, the moment when the whole village called out in one voice to Olu. The sound rolled across the crowd and swelled upward, and Adara's small body went completely still. "Adara," Amara's voice sharpened. She stepped forward and reached for her daughter's shoulder. But at that exact moment, the elder at the water's edge raised his voice in the call, and the crowd surged forward as one, and in the press of bodies Amara was pushed sideways, just 2 steps, just for a brief moment, and her hand lost its grip. 2 steps. 1 moment. That was all it took. Adara walked to the river's edge and put her feet in the water. Amara saw it happen. She screamed her daughter's name so loudly the women nearest to her flinched. She shoved through the crowd, elbowing past bodies, her heart slamming so hard she could feel it in her throat. Kofi heard her scream from 20 feet away and spun around and went cold at what he saw on his wife's face. He ran, but neither of them was fast enough. The moment Adara's feet touched the Omi, she stopped moving. She stood completely still in the shallows, her arms loose at her sides, her head tilted slightly, like a person hearing music from very far away. The water around her ankles glowed, that same soft blue-white light Amara had seen the night she went to Olu. The crowd nearest to the water stepped back. The drumming faltered. People were pointing, whispering, grabbing their children. Adara. Amara crashed through the last of the crowd and grabbed her daughter from behind, pulling hard, wrapping both arms around the small body and hauling her backward out of the water.
No, 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 no.
Adara turned in her arms. She was still herself. She was still Adara, still her daughter's face, still her daughter's eyes. But those eyes were different now. Calm in a way that was not a 5-year-old's calm. Ancient in a way that pressed against the inside of Amara's chest like a hand against a door. Mama, Adara said softly. Can you hear it? Hear what? Amara was shaking. Kofi reached them and wrapped his arms around both of them, gripping Adara against his chest like he could hold her to the earth by sheer will. The river, Adara said. It's been calling me. The water rose. It rose until it reached the bank where Amara stood with her daughter in her arms and lapped at their feet. And then Olu stood in it. The crowd shattered. People ran, screaming in every direction. Elders fell to their knees. Children buried their faces in their mothers' necks. Only Amara, Kofi, and Adara remained still. Amara because her legs would not move, Kofi because he refused to run, and Adara because she was already looking at the river goddess with a recognition that broke her mother's heart completely. Olu's eyes moved past Kofi, past Adara. Olu's eyes landed on Amara and stayed there. You knew, the goddess said. Her voice was the same as Amara remembered. Everywhere at once, patient, immense. You heard my warning clearly. You agreed to the terms without hesitation. But you ran off before I could conclude. Please. Amara's voice came out as a whisper. She pulled Adara tighter against her.
Please.
I didn't mean to. She didn't mean to step into the water. It was the crowd. I lost her hand for a moment. Please. She's only 5 years old. She is 5 years old. Olu agreed. And she is also mine. She has always been mine in part. I told you this. I told you clearly. There was a slight pause before she continued. You chose to forget. I didn't forget. Tears streamed down Amara's face. I never forgot. I told myself she would be fine. I told myself it was safe. I told myself, her voice broke. I told myself what I wanted to believe. I know that is what I did. You did not lose your daughter because you loved her too little, the goddess said. You lost her because you loved yourself more than you trusted my warning. Your impatience brought her here. Your complacency opened the door. Adara squirmed gently in Amara's arms. She turned her face up and looked at her mother with those ancient, calm eyes, and what she said next was the thing Amara would hear in her sleep for the rest of her life. It's okay, Mama. I'll still be here. I'll be in the water. Every time you come to the river, I'll be there. That is not the same, Amara wept. That is not the same as having you. No, Adara agreed softly. It is not. And then she slipped out of Amara's arms as easily as water through fingers, walked to the river's edge, and stepped in. The glow rose up around her. The water received her gently. And then she was gone. Not sinking, not drowning, simply gone. Returned to the world that had always owned her. Amara collapsed on the riverbank. Kofi caught her. He held her there in the mud at the edge of the Omi, her screams tearing open the evening air, and he wept too, silently, steadily, the way a river weeps when it has no choice but to keep moving. The village of Asoro told this story for generations after. Not as a story of a cruel goddess, not as a story of a wicked mother, but as a story of what happens when we hear a warning clearly, agree to it completely, and then slowly, day by day, season by season, convince ourselves that the danger no longer applies to us. That our love is strong enough to protect what we were told to protect. That our judgment is sharper than the wisdom we were given. Amara went to the river every morning for the rest of her life. She would sit at the bank and put her fingers in the cool water, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the water would move against the current, gently, like a small hand pressing back. It was not enough. It was never enough. But it was what remained when warnings go unheeded and blessings are taken for granted. Not nothing, but the echo of what could have been, circling forever in the current. If this story taught you something important, please subscribe, like, and share this video, and leave a comment below. Tell us, was Amara wrong to ask? Should she have been more careful? Or was her only real mistake forgetting to be afraid? We read every comment, and we will see you in the next story.